And
Oh.
what are you doing, Chiqui Realtor?
Bye-bye.
So you find your dream home in Merida just for 250,000 USD.
And you're already envisioning yourself drinking margaritas by the pool.
And then someone says, now let's talk about the closing costs.
What closing costs? Today, we're breaking down the real expense of closing costs that a buyer should expect here in Merida, Yucatán in 2026.
And don't worry, we're going to explain this in normal human language, not in a boring lawyer one.
But we also like our clients to understand what the heck they're actually signing up for. So today, that's what we're going to cover.
Hello everyone, it's Meghan and Noé, Mérida Mexico Bilingual Realtors, powered by EXP, guys.
We are specialized in helping foreign buyers navigate the sometimes complicated Yucatán real estate market as simply and painlessly as possible. So if that's you, if you fall into that category, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, sign up for everything Meghan and Noé so we can get to work helping you make your Yucatán real estate dreams a reality.
Okay guys, we're gonna talk about this very important topic because as you know, we relocated full-time here from other places. So it's very important for us to communicate this because there's a lot of agents out there that unfortunately they didn't live that experience. So they have been always living full-time in the Yucatán state, in this beautiful peninsula, but never had the experience of moving their life full-time to somewhere else. So that's what we're bringing to the table because we did that.
Well, or maybe they just haven't purchased property here, particularly as a foreign investor or a foreign buyer. So they don't have that knowledge and therefore they aren't used to explaining the differences in closing costs and closing procedures here in Yucatán. Because the truth of the matter is, things run a little differently here than they do in Canada, the US, and even Europe.
As a general rule, foreign buyers should budget between 7 to 10% above purchase price for closing costs,
with signing the dotted line and a property being yours. Now, this is comprised of, and the reason that there's a range there is because there are fixed costs in the closing as well as variable costs, which are based on the price of the property. Now, before everybody panics in the comments and is shocked by this, let's realize that not every purchase is going to hit that 10% mark. However, what we prefer is that people are prepared. They factor this part of the equation into their purchase budget, and that's how we like to work with all of our clients. We talk about the broader perspective of things when it comes to the budgets of purchase because we need to factor in the fact that there could be up to a 10% of that purchase price that needs to be accounted for in order to close on the property. It's always better to be pleasantly surprised that the closing costs came in under budget than to be stressed out halfway through the process because suddenly there's this expense that you didn't account for. So we always try to be upfront about these matters. Money matters are very important when it comes to buying property.
Okay guys, so for this topic, the big number of the closing costs, we will explain you with a fun example.
So much fun.
You have to think about it like when you are planning your own wedding. If your budget is only the venue price, you are about to discover that there's more expenses like flowers, music,
Cases and cases of champagne if it's our wedding.
fountains of chocolate, so it's exactly the same, so the wedding doesn't end up just with the ceremony and
the place to have it.
Yes.
There's more that needs to be factored into this equation.
Exactly. So real estate works exactly the same way, guys.
Yeah, you need to budget for champagne.
But you know what, guys? Here you can see this visual chart of what we are really trying to communicate down here. And you can see here this 200,000 USD property that will have something like around 14,000 USD to 20,000 USD of closing costs. And the same thing happens with this other example of 250,000 USD that will range from 17,500 USD to 25,000 USD. You can see this chart. It's very helpful to watch it and you can take a picture of it.
Yeah, and to be very clear, this is for foreign buyers. If you are a Mexican citizen and you have all your documentation to support a purchase that way, there are some expenses that will be taken out of this equation. So this is for foreign buyers who are buying property here in Yucatán in 2026.
Okay guys, so now we go with something very important to talk about, that is the notary.
Arguably the most important person involved in the closing process on a property here.
Okay guys, one of the biggest differences here is the level of importance of the notario público / the notary compared to the US and Canada.
This is true. In Mexico, the notary is actually a very specialized lawyer appointed by the government because they are skilled and specialized in property acquisition. They validate and formalize the transaction legally. Obviously, this is a very vital role.
And we want to explain now once again with a fun example, guys. In the US, a notary might only check signatures, but in Mexico, the notary is basically the quarterback in this transaction.
Quarterback, no, is the Jedi master of the entire process.
And I'm gonna tell you why, guys. They manage taxation, government filings, registration, and make sure the property legally transfers correctly to you.
Yeah, they essentially make sure that you are, in the end, the owner of said property. Obviously, this is very, very important.
And now, guys, we go with the third one, government rights and transaction fees, the invisible costs that no one talks about.
Everyone's favorite, the invisible costs. Closing costs in Mexico are made up of multiple layers of government rights and administrative expenses.
And this can include things like these, guys, and watch this chart: public registry inscription fees, revision rights, required certificates, government notices, administrative registration fees. But let's talk about with a fun example, because that is so boring.
This is my favorite. It's kind of like flying with a budget airline. You buy your ticket, and then suddenly, as you're going through the process, you realize, oh, I have to pay for my seat selection. Oh, and now I need to add baggage because that's not included. And oh yeah, there's this fee because we're using this airport. And oh, you want a glass of wine on this flight? That's gonna cost you.
Or a couple of beers. Except this one, guys, ends up you owning real estate in Mexico.
That's a lot more fun than a trip to the airport.
And then we go with something that no one likes, but we have to pay it, and it's the ISAI tax or ISAI tax or Impuesto sobre la adquisición de inmuebles. But don't worry about those words in Spanish, guys. One of the biggest closing costs is the acquisition tax, known as ISIA, as you can read here in the screen.
In many transactions, this tax alone represents about 3% of the property's value. This is the big one.
But let's explain it with a fun example, guys. So on a 250,000 USD property, this tax alone can be several thousands of dollars.
And that is exactly why a buyer should never spend 100% of their budget just on the purchase price. When you work with us, we make sure that we're having an in-depth conversation about the big picture of things, and closing costs are part of our initial consultation. This in mind, if you are close to making a purchase here in Yucatan, something in the next 6 to 12 months, don't hesitate to reach out. Let's have that conversation. Let's talk about your particular real estate goals and how we're going to make them a reality, because we would love to help you do that.
Yeah, and it was not a fun example.
It wasn't very fun. Okay, next we have the appraisal fee.
Needs to be done by a certified and licensed appraisal, guys. Not just Facebook guys saying that, in Facebook happens a lot of things that everyone is a realtor, everyone is an appraiser. Nah, forget about that stuff. A certified and licensed appraiser is required for this final part, the closing costs.
And this is something kind of specific to 2026, because 2 years ago, this was not part of the process, but it is a vital and an important part of the purchase process now.
And we will explain now this with a not very fun example once again. But it is what it is, guys. It's like basically somebody official just comes in and says,
yeah, this property is actually worth what everybody has decided it is worth.
I told you it wasn't that funny.
It's not very fun, but it does help support the legal and the tax process overall.
That's right.
It's a necessary evil and a necessary expense.
And guys, comment down below which are the closing costs you normally pay in the US and Canada. All our viewers can check that in the comment.
Yeah, we can compare markets, because ultimately, maybe the real estate purchase price here is a lot lower than what you're used to. And I can definitely assure you that the property tax is a lot lower than what you're used to if you're living somewhere like California or Texas. But maybe the closing costs are a little bit of a shock for you, because maybe you're used to paying quite a bit lower percentage on that.
And now, guys, we go with another closing cost that is named the notary fees.
And since the notary plays such an important role in the closing process, well, yes, they need to be compensated for that. This is the legal infrastructure of the closing process.
Separate from taxes and government rights, the notary also charges professional fees, guys. And that's the way it is.
Yes, and often in the case of our buyers not being Spanish speakers, they're also engaging a lawyer prior to the notary in order to review the purchase agreements, to review the contracts, make sure that they're well covered and protected, and also paying for translation services in some of these cases. If you don't have the Spanish language skills, and you know from all our previous videos that the Spanish language contract supersedes any translation, you need to be sure that what you're signing is protecting your rights. And so lawyers' fees are also a part of this in a lot of cases, unless you're bilingual, in which case you get to skip that one.
Scan this QR code, guys, so you can get in touch with us, because we have the connections with very good bilingual lawyers.
Few of them.
Fully dedicated on that activity.
And specialized in working with foreign buyers, just like like we are, and making sure that the verbiage of contracts is correct in order to protect your legal rights and make sure that you don't get yourself into a purchase pickle. So anyways, back to the notario. You're not paying someone to simply stamp a document, although it may look like that on the surface.
And like Meghan said, you are literally paying for the legal infrastructure behind the purchase.
Whether we agree with it or not, the notary is the one controlling this transaction. So they need to be a part of it. They're the one calling the shots, and they are going to get paid a fee for their time.
Okay, guys, and now we go with something very, very important, and is what applies to foreign buyers. And when we say that is setting up a bank trust or a fideicomiso.
The Fideicomiso is the entity in which a foreign buyer can own property in the restricted zones of Mexico. So you may know this from previous videos, but what is the restricted zone of Mexico? Well, it's 50 kilometers from the coastline, any coastline, as the crow flies.
Look at the crowd, guys.
And 100 kilometers from the border. This means that the majority of the highly sought out areas of Yucatán, well, they fall mostly within the restricted zone. Therefore, if you're a foreign buyer, well, you can look at this as the equivalent of the property tax because the property taxes are so low here. This is a trust that allows you to own and hold your property here in Yucatán, and you are the owner of that property. You have all the same rights as a Mexican owner does, but this is the entity that it needs to be set up within, and that has a cost to it as well. The setup fee is roughly $2,000 USD, and then annually you will pay something around, in and around, depending on which institution you hold your fideicomiso, will range between 480 USD a year to maybe 530 USD per year. And these trusts are in place for 50 years at a time.
And these bank trusts have different pricing depending on the financial institution that provides that service. But believe us, guys, we will always recommend the best one for your purchase.
Yeah, there's a number of institutions that offer fideicomisos, some stronger than others, some that are faster operating than others. And so, yes, the lawyer and the notary will ultimately work with the fideicomiso institution that they feel most comfortable with. And yeah, they do a very good job of making things happen smoothly. And it's a pretty simple element. It's not something that a foreign buyer should be afraid of. It's a very straightforward arrangement. It actually has a benefit in the sense that you can leave a very clear beneficiary of your property in the case of death. In Mexico, you may or may not know this, if you do not have a clear will as a Mexican, your properties can end up in limbo for Lord knows how long. So the fideicomiso structure is very clear. There is a clear next of kin named on your fideicomiso, and they will be the new owner of the trust should you pass away.
And obviously for our friends that live in the US and Canada that has Mexican citizenship, you don't have to set up the fideicomiso.
Correct.
Okay? So amigos que viven en Estados Unidos y México, ustedes no necesitan el establecimiento de un fideicomiso porque ustedes son mexicanos. Solamente tenemos que entregar una lista de documentos que respaldan que tú eres un ciudadano mexicano y así no pagar los $2,000 del fideicomiso ni los $500 anuales que hay que dar. Please inquire if you want to dig deeper in this, guys. We will be always ready to answer all your questions. And just to finalize this with another fun example, and that's a very common thought that sometimes happens. I don't know why. That's why you don't have to read those comments in the expat Facebook groups. A lot of foreigners, when they hear, bank trust,
They think the bank owns their property.
Yeah, and it's not that way.
This is not the case, no. This is simply a legal structure which allows a foreign buyer to own in the restricted zone, like we talked about. This is Mexico's little tax to foreign buyers, and you know what? It's fair.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that with the fideicomiso, with the bank trust, you can donate the property, rent it out, sell it. You can do whatever you want with your house.
It's your property. You just get to pay a little bit extra per year to own a piece of paradise.
Okay, guys, and we are very honest with you and always tell you all the truth. There's another additional cost in this, okay?
One other thing worth mentioning is that there is another way to purchase property in Mexico, but as a foreign buyer, I mean. But it only makes sense in some cases for some people, and that is buying through a Mexican corporation instead of a traditional fideicomiso, which would be an independent owner.
And the thing that you have to take into account with this format or legal figure is that you will have to file taxes constantly. Some people like it, some others not. To be honest, most of our clients just buy with a regular bank trust or fideicomiso. They don't use corporate. Even we do that actually,
It's a strategy, an investor strategy in some cases, and it does make sense for certain individuals, but it involves, while you don't pay your annual fideicomiso fee, you will be required to file taxes, as Noe said, and do some other administrative or bureaucratic elements on the regular. Personally, I'm not so into bureaucracy, so I will pay my fideicomiso and own my properties.
So guys, to summarize the corporation legal figure, it will always come with additional legal, accounting, and formation costs.
The Mexican corporation is usually to be considered by advanced investors. It's that kind of territory. It's not for, I've watched 3 YouTube videos about investing in Yucatan, and now I'm going to be a real estate mogul there. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
Okay, guys, so what are the biggest mistakes we've seen with buyers down here in Mexico? How buyers accidentally create problems. And this is where the people usually get into trouble. Okay, number one.
We talked about this, is when you spend your entire budget without considering the additional costs that are going to be involved with the closing of a property. You need to factor that in to your whole big picture budget. And a good real estate agent should be considering this and having this conversation with you from the beginning.
Not understanding the contracts, guys. The Spanish language contract in Merida, Yucatán, Mexico, is the one that supersedes all contracts. So the way English language contracts works here is a courtesy, and the lawyers we work with,
they do provide that service, and that is part of what the legal fees are. Not understanding the contracts, this is a huge mistake, and this is why we work with the lawyers that we do, who are completely bilingual and can assist foreign buyers, making sure that what they're signing is protecting them. Another typical mistake would be wiring money too quickly. Again, guys, if you're being pressured into sending money, hit the brakes. This is not how transactions should be happening. There need to be due diligence periods, and you need to know what you're signing and make sure that you're being protected. Again, this comes down to working with bilingual professionals. Maybe you went without a real estate agent. Not advisable, but perhaps you found a house to buy directly and you're going that route. At least engage with a bilingual lawyer to make sure that you're protected. And don't just get pressured into sending a deposit in order to take the house off the market because suddenly everybody wants to buy this property. Don't fall for it, guys.
Another thing we want to mention is assuming Mexico works exactly like the US and Canada. No.
It doesn't. You have to go with the structure that exists here. And once again, it comes down to working with people who are going to explain the process to you from the very beginning.
Scan this QR code, guys, because that's when everything starts. You can reach out for a free consultancy in a video call where we'll explain you in depth how the Mexican real estate market works.
Actually, we have a video about the entire purchase process, so be sure to check that one out as well. But
It's here.
For sure, reach out and we can have a more in-depth conversation once you have got a grasp on the purchase process.
And we go with the last one. And we go with
fatal error.
A fatal error, and it raised my blood pressure terribly, guys. And it's
chasing a suspiciously cheap deal.
We've seen that a lot of times, guys. Like guys saying, "Oh, I saw a humongous oceanfront home for 50,000 USD," and they send the listings they see online. And then after we do their due diligence and also our recommended lawyers, we find out that there's only bank foreclosures, people fishing with information. So it's, I don't know.
If it seems too good to be true, it usually is. And that rings true in Mexico as well as it does in the United States and Canada. The very important thing to remember here is that cheap in Mexico, or in Merida in particular, often becomes very, very expensive later on. Okay, so the bottom line here is that buying property in Mexico, particularly in Yucatan, it does not need to be scary or overwhelming.
But it needs to be done correctly.
That's right. So guys, if you're serious about making a purchase here in Yucatan or in Merida,
scan this QR code and reach out to us directly.
Then we can have a deep discussion about your property goals, your budget, factoring in the closing cost expenses, and if we're talking about 6 to 12 months, well, we should get to work. And don't forget to check out last week's video where we talk about the step-by-step purchase process. If you haven't watched that one already, that's a very important place to start. Then reach out and we talk about your specifics and we get to work.
Okay guys, so we try to explain all this in a very
digestible format.
Métete, Cami. Métete.
Okay.
Oh, it's good.
Like, hi, I would like to be a part of this. Hey, baby.
Okay guys, we have a
special guest
here. His name is Chiqui. Actually, it's Chiqui Realtors. You can check this guy in our social media on Instagram. There's an entire highlight about him. And what we're trying to say here is that we as certified realtors and also investors, and that we live the experience of relocating down here in Mérida, Mexico, provided us with all the knowledge to help you guys. And what are you doing, Chiqui Realtor?
Bye-bye.
Sorry for this, guys.
So essentially, guys, we have lived the experience of both relocating here and investing in multiple properties here in Yucatan. Myself as a foreign buyer, Noe obviously as a Mexican national buyer. So we understand the process ins and outs. We understand it can be overwhelming and intimidating. And we are happy to hold your hand and walk through the purchase process and helping you achieve your Mexican real estate dream.
Let's connect, guys, so you can have a smooth and pain-free purchase process down here in Merida, Yucatan, Mexico, guys. Okay, guys, so we're Meghan and Noe, Mérida Mexico Bilingual Realtors.
And we'll see you next time. Until then, hasta luego.
See you soon, guys.